Back live with you tonight, Joan in Focus, and thanks for staying on. Let me reiterate and remind you again, the next hour will be getting some analysis and reaction to the State of the Province address for Gauteng, delivered by the Premier Panyaza Lesufi. His final one for his administration. A lot of commitments, a lot of promises being made in that State of the Province address. I'm sure you were watching it. Give us your reaction. 072-110-5584. Send us your messages on X at Newzroom405. Do you think those were credible commitments made by the Premier? What are your thoughts on that? We'll get some political parties to react. Let's turn to this now. Since the passing of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi in September 2023, the position of the AmaZulu traditional Prime Minister, which he served for nearly 70 years, became vacant. The role includes communicating messages on behalf of the AmaZulu King, Misuzulu KaZwelithini, and decisions of the monarch as well as the royal family. The King appointed IFP Zululand District Mayor Reverend Thulasizwe Buthelezi as the Prime Minister. Now, Newzroom Afrika having this exclusive sit down with the incoming Prime Minister. Politics reporter Ziyanda Ngcobo is sitting down with Buthelezi to discuss the various issues. Let's take you there live. Mapaloba, over to you.
A very good evening, Thabo. Of course, as you've just mentioned, we'll be speaking to Thulasizwe Buthelezi. He's very well known in the northern parts of KwaZulu-Natal. But Shenge, welcome to Newzroom Afrika. Perhaps let's talk more about this new role that you've taken on, raising eyebrows for some because you don't have royal blood. Do you believe that that is something that doesn't put you in good stead as the new AmaZulu traditional Prime Minister?
Well, good evening, Ziyanda, and the viewers at home. Firstly, to extend our warmest gratitude and appreciation for this role which His Majesty the King has bestowed on me. It is an honor not only for me, but for my family and for the Buthelezi clan, who have served the royal court since the 1820s, from Ngangelele Kamvulane, who was an advisor to King Shaka, right through to Mnyamane, who was the Prime Minister of King Tletshwayo, to Inkosi Mathole, who was the Prime Minister of King Solomon, to Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who served three kings, King Misuzulu KaZwelithini, and the current king, who has now appointed me to this very, very important position to serve the people of the Zulu nation, to be a senior advisor to the king, to be the principal spokesperson of the king, but more importantly, to work with Amakosi to revive the pride of the Zulu nation, to work with Amakosi to secure benefits for the Zulu people who live on Ingonyama Trust land. So therefore, it is really an important responsibility which can only be executed through teamwork. And I do hope that the King will continue to lead the nation, and I will continue to fulfill this role to which I've just been appointed.
So to your critics who may be wondering, since you don't have royal blood, what would you say to them?
Well, this position is solely the prerogative of the king. You know, from the time of King Shaka, who was the founder of the Zulu nation, he appointed Ungomane from the Mdletshe clan, who was an ordinary Zulu man just like myself. So therefore, really, it is up to the king. It is up to his discretion to see who he appoints and what are the qualities he is looking for. So therefore, really, I think the king applied his mind, and mind really is to serve and to execute the vision of the king.
What is the vision of the king?
Well, the king comes at a time when really the Zulu nation is under siege, because right from 1994 you had what was called in South Africa the Zulu question, which was the cause for the IFP not to enter elections right up until 7 days before elections, because the IFP said they could not enter elections without the role, status, and powers of the Zulu monarchy being defined in the constitution. That caused the Parliament of South Africa to be convened on the 25th of April for 1 day to amend Section 160 of the Constitution so that the Zulu monarchy could be defined. And that is the struggle which I'm going to continue to complete the unfinished business which Prince Buthelezi started, to ensure that the Zulu King occupies the rightful place, the monarchy in particular, and traditional leaders in general. And therefore, that is the vision of the king now, to say Amakhosi of the kingdom should play a direct and more enhanced role in the affairs of the land.
Yeah. We'll talk more about the issues of Ingonyama Trust, because there's plenty to unpack there. But for the benefit of those who might not even know who you are, I want to talk about Thulasizwe Buthelezi, the man. You have been an IFP district mayor. I think this is your second term following the 2021 elections. And there have been lots of question marks or scandals, I'd even say, that have followed you. In fact, just last year, you were accused of a sex for jobs scandal, which you said the ANC and NFP were behind. There was also allegations of embezzling money. Why should people trust you in this position? Yes, it's the prerogative of the king, but you are occupying a position that is critical for the entire Zulu nation. So what I'm getting to is this duality of the role. Are you going to bring the AmaZulu nation into disrepute?
Well, I've been a district mayor now for 7 years. And throughout those 7 years, from the first day I occupied the position of mayor, my political detractors threw all sorts of vitriol and mud at me. And I'm still standing, because all those allegations which they've put are nothing more than sinister political campaigns aimed at discrediting me. And even now you've got nincompoops like Professor Musaqulu, who is a music professor masquerading as a political analyst, who is going all over the media trying to discredit me and trying to insult the king for the choice that the king has made. So only time will tell whether the king made the right choice. But throughout my background, my education, my training, for 23 years at the side of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, closely studying his vision and thoughts for the Zulu kingdom, I think I come well prepared for this position, but I come willing to learn from senior Amakhosi who have been there. I come willing to learn from His Majesty the King, because at the end of the day, it's the King's wishes which must be fulfilled, and it's the King's vision which we must bring to life. So those who want to criticize me now, before I've even started my work, I think let them give me a chance to see what I'm capable of doing as part of a team. Because there is the royal family, there are Amakhosi,
yes,
and many other structures which are there to support me. So I think I will not betray the king's confidence in me.
Do you believe at some stage, for credibility's sake, you may have to relinquish one and just focus only on being the AmaZulu traditional prime minister?
Not at all. I think these roles are complementary. I've been an IFP leader of the National Council since 2003, and my role as an IFP leader has exposed me to the challenges that face traditional leadership, have exposed me to the challenges that face the Zulu monarchy. So I do not see any conflict in my role as an IFP leader and my role as the Prime Minister of the Zulu nation I think those two roles complement each other.
Even though, I beg your pardon, but even though we know that the royal family is meant to be apolitical, which is why we often see the king being visited by all kinds of political leaders. And yes, you could argue that the late Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi was also an IFP leader and AmaZulu traditional prime minister, but it goes back to the point, the difference is he was of royal blood, so he was a part of the royal family, and so what he did at a political stage or in the political arena was different. With you, you're literally, as you've already been accused of, using resources, redirecting resources. Is there not a cause for concern there?
Well, the king is above party politics.
Yes.
And I'm mature and wise enough not to get the king embroiled in party politics. So those who have that fear that I will abuse my position as an IFP leader, or that I will fail to distinguish between the two, I think that fear should be allayed, because I know the difference. These are two separate roles, and at no point will they cause a conflict.
I want us now to talk about what we've seen recently. A lot has taken place since your appointment. In fact, one would say it's triggered several events. You're appointed as traditional prime minister. Prince Africa is fired as the spokesperson of the king. The king appoints himself as the chairperson of the Ingonyama Trust Board. Now, we know that the Ingonyama Trust holds 3 million hectares of land belonging to the AmaZulu nation. What is the rationale of the king actually appointing himself as the chairperson of that board? It's not illegal, but it's also not common.
Well, the king didn't appoint himself as the chairperson of Ingonyama Trust. It's the act that appoints the king. The founding act in 1994 designated the king to be the chairperson of Ingonyama Trust. And in fact, King Zwelithini was the chairperson of the trust up until a few years later. He then delegated a nominee. So there is nothing strange about that. The Zulu people do expect the king to have a direct interest and direct control over the affairs of Ingonyama Trust. And now, as chairperson of Ingonyama Trust, the king will now be able to exercise his leadership and scrutinize the type of transactions that have been going on and ensure that the beneficiaries of the trust, who are the Zulu people, do accrue benefits from the land.
So does it mean, which is something we've never seen before, that the king is going to be willing to avail himself to go and explain before Parliament about the transactions of the Ingonyama Trust and the goings-on and the operations? Because we know that in 2018 there was that high-level panel report led by former President Kgalema Motlanthe, which basically declared the Ingonyama Trust in its current form to be unconstitutional.
Well, the king was not appointed by Parliament to be chairman of Ingonyama Trust. Parliament does not own the land of Ingonyama Trust. So the king does not need to account to people who did not appoint him.
But it's an act that belongs in the South African law. So the same way that Judge Jerome Ngwenya would have had to have accounted before Parliament, it's the same way that the king now, since he's the chairperson, he's the sole trustee and the chairperson of the board, he has to go and account before Parliament.
But he was not appointed by Parliament.
Yes, but he chose not to relinquish then the role to somebody else to go and account before Parliament.
No, let me explain. You see, the chairperson of ESCOM is appointed by Cabinet. He accounts to Parliament, the chairman of SAA and all these public entities. The king was appointed by statute, by a founding act.
Yes.
And the king accounts to the Zulu people, not to Parliament. So that is why you have a board. You have a deputy chairperson, we have a CEO who will be designated to go to Parliament. But the king cannot account to people who did not appoint him. The king will account to the Zulu people. He will do the day-to-day running of Ingonyama Trust. But when it's time to go to Parliament, the king will not go there because he will go to the Zulu people and account for their land. This land we are talking about is not government land, it's not state land. The king was not appointed
But he's a constitutional monarch, we can agree on that, which means he is also subject to the very constitution that everybody in South Africa is subject to.
That is what Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi was fighting for, to say the king must be recognized in the constitution. So he was recognized in the interim constitution, but in the constitution which we have now, the ANC decided not to recognize the king. And that is a fight which Prince Buthelezi kept on fighting for his whole life, to say Chapter 7 and Chapter 12 of the Constitution must be amended so that the roles, powers and functions of the king can be enshrined in the Constitution. So as we speak, it is not there in the Constitution.
Thanks for watching In Focus. We're in conversation with the newly appointed AmaZulu Traditional Prime Minister Thulasizwe Buthelezi. And before the break, Shega, we were talking about the Ingonyama Trust and the king now being the chairperson of that board. But also, you know, there's been so much happening. Last year, we saw a breakdown in the relationship between Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi and the AmaZulu King over this issue of the Ingonyama Trust and the appointment of Thanduyise Mzimela, who's now been removed as the chairperson. Many people are concerned, as you can imagine, about what is happening. Are there plans to sell this land for profit, as was the concern of the late Umntwana Pindangen?
Well, I think people who should be concerned are Amakhosi, because they are the direct owners of the land. And later on this week, His Majesty will be meeting with Amakhosi from King Cetshwayo district to outline some of his plans. For example, the king is very concerned that in every village in KZN you find a clinic. But in that clinic, there are no doctors. There are thousands of young Zulu students who have an aspiration to study further, but they don't have funds for tertiary education. Yet you have mines, coal mines, gold mines on the land, which are not benefiting the people. So the vision now of the king is to put the beneficiaries, ordinary Zulus, at the center of all activities and all rewards which can come from the use of the land. So that is the vision which His Majesty has, and that is the vision which he is carrying out based on the founding principles of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, which is why when the king appointed me, he said, in his own words at Isandlwane, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi had a vision for this nation, and it is up to us now to take the baton and carry on to complete that mission which he had.
Is it true that the king, in light of all the movements that have happened with the Ingonyama Trust Board, that he wrote to Minister Thoko Didiza asking her to remove some members of the board in order for other appointments to be made?
Well, in that same breath, later on this week, the king will be meeting with Minister Thoko Didiza in a face-to-face meeting before the end of the week, so that the king can clarify some of these issues, because the Minister of Land Affairs is a very important and trusted ally of the king in managing the affairs of the Zulu Kingdom. So we do appreciate the support that Minister Thoko Didiza has provided to the king up until now, and they continue to enjoy a very cordial and a very productive relationship. And later on in the week, when they do meet, some of these issues will be clarified.
Are you concerned about, what might happen with that 2018 high-level panel report by former President Kgalema Motlanthe, as we spoke earlier, which declared the Ingonyama Trust in its current form as unconstitutional, and that it blurs the lines between, communal land tenure and what the rights of the people who live on that land are. There was the issue around actually making people who are living on the Ingonyama Trust land pay, for PTO's permission to occupy. Is the king worried that, because the matter was kicked further down the road, is he worried at all that this might come back at some stage and really become a headache?
Well, AmaKhosi rejected the Motlanthe high-level panel report at Imbizo in Ulundi on the 4th of July 2018.
Yes.
So we have rejected that high-level panel.
They can reject it, but it's a constitutional report. It was mandated by Parliament to go and investigate. So it could actually see a change in the law. So yes, AmaKhosi can reject it, but at this stage, the power is not in their hands.
Well, it's up to the ruling party to ascertain whether they believe the land of the Zulu people in its current form under Ingonyama Trust should be changed. But for the king, and as far as the king is concerned, he remains the custodian of the land, and all those things which are contained in the Kgalema Motlanthe report are false. And there is no one who is going to take the land away from the Zulu people. They continue to use the land because for us, land has a spiritual value, has economic value. From generations to generations has been passed down. And therefore the king's primary objective is to protect that land so that it is not sold, that it is not taken away by any high-level panel report. And our duty is to support the king in protecting the land.
So, in other words, you are rejecting a report that was mandated by Parliament?
Yes, we have rejected that report.
And these issues come at a time when the king is also facing what some would say a personal attack. His former spokesperson, Prince Africa Vonkweni, has also leveled allegations against the king to say that the reason why he has been, fired, as well as the former chairperson of the Ingonyama Trust Board, Tsandu Mzimela, is because there is a plan to loot funds. I mean, we know that according to that report, that land, 3 million hectares of land, is worth billions and billions of rands, but there were no books to account for what happens on the land and where the money goes. Your reaction?
Well, it's unfortunate that people who have been claiming to support the king now come up with sort of all these wild allegations. No one is going to loot the land. That is why the king has decided that he himself must now be the chairperson. To the contrary, the land is now going to be fully utilized for the benefit of the people who live on the land, agriculturally and in all other ways. So therefore, there's no one who's going to loot the land. Those are just, hallucinations from a former spokesperson who now feels that he can no longer be part of this broader plan to transform the Zulu nation and to transform the lives of the people who live on Ingonyama Trust land.
Are they still being made to pay PTOs?
I live on Ingonyama Trust land. I don't pay PTO. My neighbor, Ugadubazane, she's an old lady. She doesn't pay PTO. That is a fallacy. The only people who would pay any sort of lease are the commercial businesses, because they are running a business on Ingonyama Trust land. But ordinary Zulu people, they do not pay. We can go out here and see and verify for ourselves. But because people want to create this monster and create all these stories, then these things are said. But no one pays for the land on which they live.
Let's talk about the stability of the AmaZulu nation and this in relation to the king's interpersonal relations with his family and those around him, because as you can imagine, since he has occupied, or well, let me say, since he's ascended the throne, there have been lots of wranglings. In fact, there are lots of matters before the court. What is the king's sense right now, especially now that he's getting more accusations after firing people? When are things going to stabilize?
Well, the king is focused on doing his job of leading the Zulu nation. It is unfortunate that you have sections of the royal family who have now pursued and opted to fight against a decision and against custom and the rightful heir of the Zulu throne. And that is why the king has then designated 2024 as the year of peace and unity to revive Zulu pride and dignity. Because the king is now reaching out to all those who have been opposing him to say, come on board and share in this vision which I as the Zulu king have. And therefore the king is reaching out as we speak. There are a number of events that are planned which are aimed at forging unity within the royal family. And we do hope that, for example, the unveiling of the statue of King Zwelithini is a very, very important occasion which the king hopes will be used to unify the royal family. And we do call on those who are opposing the king to say, really, it is now time to bury the hatchet, to accept that the king is on the throne, and for all members of the royal family to come and take their place alongside the king in leading the nation.
And it's an important role that the king plays, especially even his late father, in terms of working together with whoever is in government to bring about stability. What is the king's vision for 2024, especially in an election year where the voice of the king has always been critical in a province like KwaZulu-Natal that is prone to violence, and we've seen that surge of political killings once more?
Well, the king is a champion for peace. To all the political leaders that have come to see him from across the length and breadth of South Africa, he has pleaded that all campaigning must take place in a climate of tolerance and mutual respect. And in that respect, the king works very closely with government to ensure that he champions programs of social cohesion. He works very closely with the KZN Premier to ensure that marginalized sectors of the society are able to be brought on board. So the king really is a unifying figure. And as different political parties are now campaigning, the king really is seen as a symbol of unity and a symbol which can bring people together.
And is the idea or the suggestion that emanates from, I think, about 10 years ago to possibly have a cleansing ceremony for the province still on the cards?
Well, there have been those suggestions before, because primarily the violence in KZN was black-on-black violence that took the lives of 20,000 people. And that is the unfinished business, unfortunately, which was between the IFP and the ANC. Because the leader of the IFP, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, all that he did on the instructions of the leaders of the ANC, Oliver Tambo, Nelson Mandela, and it was therefore unfortunate that when they returned from exile and came back from Robben Island, there was this propaganda which was not able to be shut out to say Prince Buthelezi was on the other side of the liberation struggle. Therefore, it is incumbent upon those who are left behind to complete that reconciliation between the ANC and the IFP, because primarily that is what caused the violence.
Thanks for staying tuned. We're still in conversation with Thulasizwe Buthelezi, and before the break we were talking about the role of the king in a province such as KwaZulu-Natal that's so prone to violence. But I want to turn back to you as you take over from someone like Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. Many would say you've got big shoes to fill. What are the lessons, as you've said, you spent over 23 years, 25 years with him at his side, the critical things that you are going to be implementing as you get the work done?
The first lesson is consultation, because you cannot be in this position if you think you know it all. It's important to consult firstly with the king, always with the king, and also with AmaKhosi. The second lesson is respect. Respect for everyone in how you treat people, and most importantly, being able to listen. Because the wisdom which you get from ordinary people on the ground is much more than you will get from the textbook. So I am new to the position. I do not know everything, but I'm humble enough to learn, and therefore I am under no illusion that in the position that I am, I will make enemies. I have made enemies.
Who are your enemies?
I'm not sure, but they know who they are. I'm
Prince
sure
Africa, maybe.
in this position that, I will be misunderstood. But that is the cause of people who have accepted upon their responsibility to build the new Zulu nation. And I think history has chosen me at this point to be part of this grand plan of the king to build a new Zulu kingdom which will prosper the Zulu nation spiritually, economically, and otherwise, so that this land which we inherited from our forefathers, we give to future generations in a much more healthier state.
Does the king have the support of AmaKhosi as we speak right now?
The king has the overwhelming support of AmaKhosi, because that is his sounding board. And therefore, without AmaKhosi, who are the pillars of the kingdom, there is no Zulu monarchy. And therefore, AmaKhosi remain at the center of the king's efforts to revitalize the Zulu kingdom and remain at the center of his efforts to lead. And that is very clear from the instruction he has given me and my deputy, Inkosi Chiliza,
yes,
to say we must work very closely with AmaKhosi.
The role of traditional leaders, we touched on it earlier. It's still been a battle that many across the country have been taking up. What is the plan? What is the king's plan in this regard?
Well, the king plans to showcase his leadership of Ingonyama Trust as a model of what traditional leaders throughout South Africa can emulate. And I think if we give him his support and allow the king an opportunity to lead, and all those who are the discordant voices in the courts and elsewhere against him, if right now they allow themselves to be led and to be part of the vision, the king will achieve great things for the Zulu nation.
All right, Thulasizwe Buthelezi, we wish you well in your new role. Hopefully you won't make more enemies as you continue on your journey. That's Thulasizwe Buthelezi, IFP District Mayor, but now also adding onto his plate of becoming the AmaZulu Traditional Prime Minister, reflecting on the King's decisions, in particular to have himself as the chairperson of the Ingonyama Trust Board, saying he won't be appearing personally before Parliament, but he'll send the deputy, but there is a vision to use that land to benefit the kingdom of the Zulu.